podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
On a Premier League weekend with more banana skins than Mario Kart, injury-stricken Manchester United avoided theirs away at Nottingham Forest. Bruno Fernandes and Christian Eriksen, a late addition to the starting lineup, purred in midfield. Antony, well, his tenacity and confidence have earned him the plaudits, as well as a good goal and a fine assist. Now Erik Ten Hag's side travel to Sevilla, requiring victory to reach the Europa League semi-finals, and they'll return to England straight after and prepare for an FA Cup semi-final at Wembley against perhaps the informed team of English football in Brighton. Round one of the United against Brighton FA Cup semi-final has gone to the red corner as well. Manchester United women made history on Saturday evening. It was difficult, but in a classic cup tie, Marc Skinner's side prevailed thanks to a clinical Rachel Williams finish. A 3-2 victory taking them to their first ever major final, where they'll face Chelsea in mid-May. A very warm welcome to the Manchester United Weekly Podcast. I'm Harry Robinson, and with me as always is Jack Tate. Thank you for joining us. There's so much to talk about, so we'll dive in very shortly, but also on today's show, we play Guess the Player as always. There's news on an under-18s Manchester derby, relegation for one of our loanees, and more headlines for another. You might be able to guess who it is. Jack, let's begin on Nottingham Forest. A really good victory, as I say, on a weekend where plenty of other teams, rivals or not, were slipping up to unexpected defeats, or perhaps a little expected in the form of Chelsea and Tottenham. But Newcastle and Arsenal certainly slipping up. United coped with this challenge, and it was a big challenge very well. If you think about the mood we had after the Sevilla game, just that sense of doom with so many injuries, but this was a really good performance, and Antony with a goal and assist, but I think also everything he showed, some frustrating bits, absolutely, but it's feeling, especially in Rashford's absence, there's a sense over these last few performances that we're starting to see Antony's qualities more obviously than we did before.
Yeah, I think the game in general, to be honest, coming into it, it felt like the stars were aligning for this to be a classic sort of, United drop points when everyone else has also dropped points. Came out of the Sevilla game with obviously a lot of injuries. Then right before the game, you find out Malacia is also injured. Now don't have a single left back in the squad. Dallo ends up having to play out there. Sabitzer gets injured in the warm-up. It was just all feeling like...
And then De Gea 5 minutes in looked like he might have to go off as well.
I tweeted after that.
It did feel
Could you imagine telling, like, if I'd have called you up at half-time in the Sevilla game and told you, Harry, we're going to draw this game, and by the time we're 5 minutes into our game against Forest on Sunday, we're going to be without De Gea, Varane, Martinez, Malacia, Shaw,
ridiculous.
Sabitzer.
I'd have been as shocked as the fact that I was getting signal in Old Trafford.
But I've got to say, I think the team responded brilliantly, especially with this game being away from home. Nottingham Forest are not a particularly great team. And as I think with Everton and Brentford recently, I think they definitely helped us a lot in this game with how they played. But at the same time, given how poor our away form has been for a lot of the season, albeit mainly the problems have come against better teams, and the fact that when, to the extent that Forest are a good side, that their good performances normally do happen at home at the City ground.
Drew with City
the way that we approached
just
that
a couple of months ago.
Yeah, exactly. And even, first 20 minutes, there were signs that, there was some trouble there for United to navigate. And I thought the way that we ended up controlling the game, that trio in midfield was exquisite throughout the game. It was such a joy to have Eriksen back. And in the end, I actually think him playing over Sabitzer ended up making us so much better. And like you said, Antony was the absolute star of the show. Yeah.
We could have scored a lot more in the end, couldn't we? You're right, the first 20 minutes was, we looked vulnerable, but I think Forest was still open enough that we were looking good going forward with that vulnerability at the back.
Yeah.
We would have scored more had the wingers, Sancho and Antony, been at the back post more often. It's an issue we've discussed before. To be honest, it's an issue we discussed long before Sancho and Antony joined Manchester United. I can't remember who we would have been speaking about several years ago, but we've discussed this so many times, and it's nothing particularly hugely insightful, is it? The best teams, Manchester City most prolifically for the last few years, but Liverpool did the same with Salah and Mane. Arsenal doing it with Saka. Even though Arsenal drew at the weekend, the first Saka goal is the perfect example of that your wingers on the other side get to the back post and they will profit from it more often than not. If we'd done that more, we would have profited. In the end, Antony only did it once, but his whole performance was excellent. He used his right foot a couple of times, which was lovely to see.
Yeah.
And the assist is brilliant. The intensity of his game, I just love the aggression that he comes into every action with. The mentality spot on. Whatever people said about his double spin back in the autumn, no one would be thinking about that now, because it's just everything has aggression and intensity to it. And he had a good game, I thought, against Everton, but his finishing was obviously well off, and he missed two one-on-ones. A couple of them were good saves, but one of them certainly he really should have scored. So I was delighted he got a goal here, and the assist is brilliant. On
the right foot thing first, he's actually done that, I've noticed, in the last 3 or 4 games. Brentford, Everton, Sevilla, and against Forest. He's, in all of those games, at least once, he's gone down the outside and actually used his right foot, either for a cross or a shot. It's obviously still only once a game, but
that's
in
enough.
Some ways that is enough. Yeah, exactly.
It's just
he's
the
never
threat.
He's never going to be a Christian Eriksen type where he can literally use both feet equally. And we don't even need him to be that. You just need enough so that a defender can't completely sell out on knowing that you're going to the inside. And it showed in that the opportunities that he did have against Nottingham Forest, even though he didn't end up scoring from one of his trademarks, sort of cut in and bend it to the far post, he created better spaces for himself to have those shots than he normally does, because he did just plant that seed of doubt in the fullback's mind that, is he going to go down the outside? Is this going to be the time when he does it? You're spot on about, the mentality and his approach to the game. Everything he does is at, 100 miles an hour. There's never any ounce of kind of hesitation in what he does. The frustration has always come that he's not hesitant, but he slows play down sometimes. And he hasn't been doing that recently. He's been releasing the ball.
He certainly did
quicker.
that at Newcastle away. So it's not so long ago.
Yeah.
But these last few games have been good.
No. And what I've liked about him as well is that I've always felt the thing that was lacking from his game is that, we've talked about how him and Sancho both kind of excel as sort of link-up players. They're, rather than traditional wingers like a Rashford who's going to try and go past their man every time. The thing I've felt that's always been slightly lacking from Antony is I wanted more of that link-up play to be going forward. You think about Sabitza's goal in the FA Cup against Fulham, where Sancho gets the ball on the left, plays sort of that ball down the line to Shaw, who's underlapping. You want more of those kind of passes from Antony, where he is linking up the play, but he's getting us forward rather than just coming inside to the central midfielders or backwards to the fullback. And he did that exactly for the assist for Dallow's goal, which was a brilliant dribble, and that pass was magnificent. Yeah.
On the other wing, Sancho's such an interesting case, because there are moments in the game where he's so valuable and he's less hell for leather than Antony, and that has its perks, but I think they are outweighed by the negatives. The advantage of that is that it can slow United's attack down in a good way sometimes and add a bit of patience to how we're going about things. And we've mentioned this a few times, and I think we saw it against Forest on several occasions where we managed to have those sustained attacks and we were doing well at really keeping them pinned in, and eventually something will come of it. But we're not seeing Sancho's skill enough, and he is hesitant in a way that when Antony's not hesitant counter-attacking, I don't get the same sense as Sancho, where it just feels like he needs activating. Feels like there's a key that needs to be turned, and then you'll get the full Jadon Sancho. He's just not operating at the level that he could, given the skill there. He just has to be more aggressive. And the point remains that we made a few weeks ago, that he will fit into a better United team. Even if he stayed at this level, he would look a lot better in a future United team that was more attuned to how he plays. That would mean a different role for the fullbacks, a slightly different striker, I think. But too often throughout the games, you're just thinking, just shoot, or just pull the trigger for whether it's a shot or a pass, or just take a man on. And it's so frustrating watching someone kind of hold themselves back, and somehow he needs to get that confidence.
I thought the second half was better yesterday. I thought he did seem to have a little bit more conviction. There were a few times where he did go past his man, and he did just seem to have a bit more maybe intensity in what he was doing. But it is in general, it's such a strange case.
Sorry to butt in, but it's a pretty rare full 90 minutes for him. He often gets taken off when he starts. And I did think that I remember one of the moments late on that you're talking about where he took a man on. I did think, it's so rare to have Sancho play this late on in a game. Maybe that has helped him build a bit of confidence up. So maybe a couple of weeks down the line, we'll be talking in the same way we're now talking about Antony. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, potentially. We've seen it with Antony, how quickly things can change. I just think with Sancho, it's hard to kind of put your finger on exactly what it is that's going on, because it's not that he's playing badly. He had a good game against Forest in general. He was, heavily involved in a lot of the good things we were doing. It's just that there feels like there is a piece missing. You used the word a few weeks ago, this might have been in the Patreon Q&A, I'm not sure, but you used the phrase that he just doesn't seem to have any power. And that's in sort of every aspect of his play. And I think, I agree with that. And I think the word I keep coming back to is there's just not quite enough dynamism in what he's doing. That's always been the trademark of someone like Rashford. And even Antony, even though Antony isn't the sort of classic, take your man on down the outside kind of winger, there is still a lot of dynamism. He is a very dynamic player. And I just don't get that sense from Sancho. That's not to say that he can't put it into his game, because he has all of the technical ability, all of the sort of knowledge of how to play football. Some of the runs that he makes, his movement is very good. He's
a boy made in the cages of South London. He's obviously going to have that somewhere. But as I say, as we're both saying, someone needs to activate it.
It is.
By the way, his last 90 minutes in the league was mid-October, the 0-0 draw against Newcastle.
Wow. And I mean, that probably won't change very much, just simply because we have a lot of options out wide. That's kind of the area where our depth is the best. Obviously, at the moment, it's not because of Rashford and Garnacho being injured, but with both of those probably coming back in the next couple of weeks, you'd think this next sort of 2 or 3 games is going to be really, really important for Sancho to try and, make sure he is at the top of that pecking order. Because if Sancho is playing really well, and by the time Rashford comes back, we can slot Rashford back up top as a striker. Sancho will continue playing, but he's got to show enough in these next couple of weeks.
Otherwise, yeah. Well, Garnacho's back in some form of training. He had an Instagram story today which showed he's got his boots back on rather than trainers. So I'd expect he'll be back relatively soon. So yeah, the clock is ticking for Sancho. He'll obviously get more chances, but if Garnacho comes back and is as explosive as he was before, that comparison certainly doesn't help either. But
and again, I want to say, just to reinforce the point, it's not that Sancho's playing badly. Like I said, his performance against Forest was good. It's just there feels like you see little flashes of the talent and the ability that he has, and you just feel like there's more to give. And for whatever reason, he's not unlocking that extra 25-30% of what he can do.
Yeah, the Forest game was not a bad performance. I do think he has played badly recently.
Yeah.
Like the Everton game had some really negative bits to it, and there've been a few others. But I think what gives you hope is that there are players, we're so far from writing Sancho off. Some people will have done, and I know a lot of United fans will think who just think Sancho hasn't got the mentality required to play for United, and they may be proved right. We'll see. But we're certainly not writing Sancho off yet, and what gives you hope is that players we wrote off a lot more than him, like Aaron Wan-Bissaka or even Diogo Dalot a couple of years ago, are now have shown themselves they've stepped up. So let's hope before the end of the season, Sancho can show, even if it's not fully what he's capable of, just an improvement enough that you go, yeah, we're sticking with this kid and he's going to come good. Before we have a first guess the player clue, you mentioned them earlier, but the midfield three, particularly Fernandes and Eriksen, just joyous, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah, Sabitzer could have played. The Ten Hag and the physios decided not to take the risk, which I think speaks volumes as to where we are with these injuries. But yeah, Fernandes and Eriksen, there are some players. And as you mentioned earlier, Forest really opened up for us. I think we didn't take full advantage of that in terms of scoring, but I think Fernandes and Eriksen certainly took full advantage of that. Just lovely to watch.
Yeah, they were both majestic, honestly, is probably the word I'd use to describe that performance. It was just lovely to see them back together. I think I'd honestly sort of forgot how good Eriksen is.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why I'd forgotten that, because he was obviously massively important to us at the start of the season. But just some of his touches, the way he moves the ball so quickly and so effortlessly, it's just such a huge sea change from whatever else we have in midfield. And I sort of hadn't quite realised how long it had been since we've seen the three of them, Casemiro, Fernandes and Eriksen playing together. You know, the last time would have been January when Eriksen got injured. And since then, there hasn't been that many times when Casemiro and Fernandes have played because of all of Casemiro's suspensions. There was a couple of moments in particular. There was one in the first half. I'd have to go back to find the exact minutes. I'm not sure. But the ball came into Eriksen. We weren't under pressure, but he was receiving the ball with a few Forest players around him. The ball I think it actually came straight from De Gea. It was sort of it looked like a scuffed kick, but it might have been a intentional pass on his weak foot into Eriksen in midfield. Eriksen's got 2 or 3 Nottingham Forest players around him and just first time sort of clips it around the corner to Bruno Fernandes, and then we're straight on the counter-attack. It's just what he brings to our team is massive. And I think the biggest compliment I can pay to Bruno and Eriksen in their performance is this was probably Casemiro's quietest game in a United shirt. And despite how good he's been, we've needed Casemiro much more than we should have throughout the season. And it was lovely to watch a game where, to be honest, I didn't really notice him that much. Yeah,
we're going to talk a bit about how the fullbacks helped Eriksen and Fernandes in that, but also you mentioned goal kicks. We're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes as well. Casemiro, quiet, but he also has in his locker those clipped balls when he's facing his own goal and receives it with the back to the opposition's goal, and that just immediate clip ball over to the right wing, which is also just another option to open a team up quickly. Yeah. Even if we then lose possession, we've still made a bit of territory gained, to use a rugby term. That midfield started 17 games together, 15 wins and 2 draws. Wow. And yeah, you're right, they hadn't played together since January the 28th, I think it was, against Reading, in the game that Andy Carroll seemed to side down the entire United team. I've hinted at what we're going to talk about. Let's have first guess the player clue before we get onto that. It's me setting the clue for Jack this week. It's a bit of a challenge. Are you ready?
Oh, great. Well, we were just talking about your dissertation earlier on old United players, so I'm expecting something quite old.
Okay. The period we were talking about was Edwardian, so don't expect that old. But yeah, you would be right. I'll help in saying that they are not currently playing football. And the clue is, that's an extra one. That's kind of a -1 clue. But clue 1 is that I played for Manchester United, Leeds United, West Bromwich Albion, Philadelphia Fury and Shamrock Rovers.
Philadelphia Fury?
United, Leeds, West Brom, Philadelphia Fury and Shamrock Rovers.
Okay, that is a blast from the past. I would have got that it was old just from Philadelphia Fury because that is a team that does not exist anymore. Okay, well, I've got no idea who it is.
I'll let you ruminate on that one, yeah.
The only 2 things that are going through my head is they play for Shamrock Rovers. I'm going to guess they might be Irish. And also, I'm just trying to think of the time period, because I know George Best went and played in America after he left United. Played for a couple of, I think one in LA and one in Florida somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking it might be that sort of period. Because that was obviously not like MLS or anything, but it was sort of a thing back then. So that's sort of the time period I'm thinking of, but I've got no idea who it is.
2 good, educated conclusions. Let's see. I'll give you a clue 2 before the Patreon Q&A after we talk a bit about... Let's start with Diogo Dalot. Injury enforced his inclusion because of Molasses' absence, but he was very good. He's obviously played at left back before, but before we get onto him specifically, the ease at which players come in, given how many injuries we've had, the ease at which players come into the team now is a testament really to the preparation and the instructions from Ten Hag and how clear player roles are in this team.
I love listening to Ten Hag talk about team selection because after the game, everything has such a clear reasoning behind it. You know, obviously Dalot was enforced, but he was asked on Sky Sports after the game about, you know, why play Lindelof on the left and Maguire on the right, even though throughout their careers, they've generally played on the opposite sides. And, you know, he talked about how he preferred the angles that Maguire has and that Lindelof is a better defender on his weak foot than Maguire, so you play Lindelof on the left side. And, you know, to your point, I think players coming in and out of the team is going to be more important than ever towards the end of the season, given all the injuries we have. And it makes it so much easier for someone like Dalot to come in a relatively unfamiliar position and play as well as he did. You know, I thought he was really, really good all game. The one-footedness was an issue at times in defence, but never really an issue going forward.
That was one very bad moment.
Yeah. But, you know, in general, I thought he did really, really well. And you can see as well that he in particular, he's someone that I really notice. you can almost sort of see the cogs turning in his brain when he plays, especially when we're in possession. Like you can really see him putting into practice instructions that Ten Hag has given him, especially in terms of coming inside into midfield when we're in possession. You sort of see his brain like click into gear. It's like, oh shit, I better make that 10-yard run, get into midfield. And a few times it really, really paid off. He did a good interview on NBC after the game as well. Dalot did, talking about how he and Eriksen would rotate throughout the game, and sometimes Dalot would go forward and he'd sort of take up Eriksen's attacking position, which is what happened for the goal. It was. I'm not saying it was a world-class performance or anything, but I think for a player coming in on relatively short notice in a somewhat unfamiliar position, I think you've got to give him a lot of credit for playing as well as he did. Yeah,
the role of the fullbacks in this game was massive. You've spoken a bit about this in the past, but you mentioned there him swapping roles with Eriksen, but that wasn't just up the pitch, that was also at the other end of the pitch. Eriksen was often dropping into Dalot's position and he went into midfield. There was all sorts going on, and I do think Fernandes and Eriksen looked so good because they had that support of those inverted fullbacks. It was the goal kick's really interesting. I think it's an underrated fact that the first goal from a goal kick, the Fernandes, that powerful shot when Antony messed it up a bit and Fernandes came in and Navas tipped it out, that was from a goal kick as well. I mean, just to sum up that one, Dalot started centrally. As soon as Lindelof received the ball, Dalot sprinted out wide. In doing so, that dragged an opponent away and into that central space. In front of Lindelof, Eriksen came in. Lindelof passed it to him. Eriksen flicked it on straight away, and we were in a 4-on-4. And that ended with Antony with the ball on the right wing, and then Fernandes with that powerful shot. First goal is not quite so directly from a goal kick because Martial loses it, but up to that point from the goal kick, and then he wins it back and shoots and it lands for Antony. And I was impressed, and I was particularly impressed because by Victor Lindelof, who was kind of acting like the conductor of the whole thing. He's clearly an intelligent player, but you could visibly see him talking De Gea through it, directing Dalot where to go, calling Eriksen back in, pushing Maguire out wider. It was pretty useful having him there, actually.
What a compliment. It was pretty useful, actually, having him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a compliment when you consider who he was replacing in the team. I didn't want to go overboard because I don't want him to replace Martinez permanently. So in that context, a very high compliment.
Yeah, it was definitely something that stood out throughout the game. And again, obviously with the caveat that Forest made it quite easy for us, so they weren't putting us under too much pressure. But that's still something, even going back just a week or so to the Everton game, Everton set up sort of similarly to Forest in how little pressure they put us under. And even on that game, we weren't playing through them anywhere near the way that we did against Forest, because it was very much sort of Fernandes, just give Fernandes the ball and then he, will play this brilliant 40, 50 yard pass. This was sort of another level of controlled possession and being able to build from the back. I mean, you mentioned the first goal sort of coming from a goal kick. The second goal doesn't come from a goal kick, but comes from a sort of a similar position. And that also starts from Lindelof. He plays a great pass in between Forest's first line of press into Casemiro, and then goes into Eriksen, and he then sweeps it through to Antony. And all of that happens for your first time. The pass from Casemiro to Eriksen out to Antony. Both of those passes are first time, and we're out of the press and then working a lot of space. Ten Hag mentioned it after the game that part of the plan going into this against Forest was, and this I go back to even the Arsenal game right at the start of the season, Harry. The first time you sort of noticed it, how what was our first goal against Arsenal? I can't remember. Oh, Antony. It was Antony again. His debut. That was a similar one where we sort of lured Arsenal onto us and then that creates a lot more space to work into if you can beat that press. And Ten Hag mentioned that trying to sort of draw Nottingham Forest onto us and then create all that space in behind them was exactly the plan today. And that's the second goal came from one of those scenarios.
Yeah, and you're right. It absolutely requires a certain type of opposition. And you don't want to take away too many huge conclusions beyond mentality when you're playing Forest, who have lost the last 10 games. I think you can take away things about the character and that the team did well. And we're going to speak a bit about Maguire and Lindelof specifically coming into the team when we preview the Sevilla game, because we're going to talk about who should start away at Sevilla. But I do think you can take encouragement from not necessarily the specific moves, or even the fact that United completed them. It was the it's just a positive sign that you see how well Dalot and Eriksen and Lindelof and De Gea were interacting and how well they were reading the kind of triggers of each other's movement, because that's something we wanted to see from this Ten Hag team, is those specific patterns of play. And these are ones in this game, they were very easy to notice. There's probably so many other times where if we were able to speak to Ten Hag and he could explain and talk us through a game, he'd go, oh, that one, and us mere normals wouldn't notice. But when you do notice them, it's nice to see. I guess the final question to talk about before we wrap up on this game is, why didn't we score more?
That is the $1 million question.
Second highest expected goals of the season, but even from the eye test, it was just like, come on, over and over again.
It's quite incredible that in the 3 Premier League games we've played since Newcastle, Brentford, Everton and Nottingham Forest, it's quite incredible that in those 3 games we've only managed to add 5 to our goal difference, because the Everton game could have been 4 or 5-0. The Nottingham Forest game could have been 4 or 5-0. Brentford wasn't quite as emphatic, but certainly could have scored 2 or 3 in that first half. You know, these 3 scorelines have felt almost like as bad as they could have been given the level of performances that we've had. I mean, why didn't we score more? In this game, a couple of fantastic saves from Keylor Navas is part of it. Certainly the one from the Bruno's amazing first time shot from the corner. You know, that was an unbelievable save. Yeah. Some poor finishing. I felt like it's a poor final ball as well, that were still allowing us to take shots, but sort of lower percentage shots than they probably should have been. It's a hard one to put your finger on. Would that all be solved by bringing in a quality striker? Maybe. You know, there's no guarantee, but you'd certainly have more confidence in that. So it's a tricky one, because it hasn't been a problem for us throughout the season. I wouldn't say that. Like, I go back to, I think it was the season, was it 2017? There was a period we went through where we were playing really well, but he in particular was just missing chance after chance after chance. This hasn't felt like that most of the season to me. It really has felt like quite a recent thing, just that in the last few weeks we're really struggling to put away chances. Yeah,
it's frustrating.
I mean, could it all just be down to
I think
Rashford?
Poor finishing.
Maybe, but I mean, even in the Everton game before he got injured, it was still a problem then.
Yeah, I don't think it's that. I think there has been. The Everton game was more obviously poor finishing. This game, it would be interesting to watch it again and see if there's any other reason beyond good saves, slightly off finishing and bad luck. To be fair, I think the thing we mentioned earlier about the wingers running in, there were a lot of opportunities that we could have scored on a rebound or at the end of a cross where we didn't do that. But even that doesn't even add to the XG. So beyond that, I don't know. We had a lot of shots, 22 of them, and that does add up, even if they're not all of the highest quality. But anyway, up to third, 6 points clear of Tottenham in fifth with a game in hand. And ultimately, if we were to finish behind Newcastle, it would be incredibly annoying. But if it's for the sake of winning another trophy, then absolutely. And I think there's a lot more positivity about United's chances of top 4 now. It's not, you've seen how much can change in one weekend.
Well, especially with this weekend the next game.
But United did well this weekend.
Yeah. Especially with Spurs being our next game.
Yeah.
You've got to think if you go to Spurs and beat them, that gives us then a 9-point buffer with a game in hand as well. But then, at that point, you've got to think it's sewn up. At this point, especially if you go and lose to Spurs, it's still...
Don't forget the Seagulls.
It's still a little bit up in the air, but yeah. And Villa as well, with the other ones now.
Yeah, but Brighton have 2 games in hand on Villa. If Brighton were to win both their games in hand, they'd be 55 points, which would be a point behind Newcastle.
And we're on 59?
Yeah, and we also have a game in hand. So if we were all to win our games in hand, we'd be on 62, Newcastle would be 59, and Brighton would be 55. So there is a big cushion.
There's still a buffer.
Yeah.
But we do still have to play all 3 of those teams, Spurs, Villa, Brighton.
Interesting. Yeah, and Fulham. Okay, guess the player clue 2. As a reminder, your first clue, it was I played for Manchester United, Leeds United, West Brom, Philadelphia Fury and Shamrock Rovers. And your second clue is I played for United 115 times under Sir Matt Busby. After my career, I became a hugely popular pundit in my home country.
Oh, God. Okay.
115 United appearances under Busby. And after my playing career, I became a hugely popular pundit in my home country.
All right. Well, I'm still quite confused because the player I actually didn't even really register the first time around that you included Leeds in those clubs that he played for, because there aren't that many players that have played for both. The one that I had in my head was Tony Dunn, but he played for United way too many times than 115, just because he's Irish from that sort of period that I'm thinking of. I mean, he would probably still be my only guess, really, because I don't think... I mean, there's like Shea Brennan as well. Shea's like, but again, he would have played for United way too many times. I mean, I'll guess Shea Brennan, but I'm really not confident in that guess.
Okay. Incorrect. He played for United 315 times. He played for Waterford United after leaving, but other than that,
right? Okay. I'm just trying to think of Irish players from that time, but I think the ones that are going to come, that definitely Tony Dunn and Shea Brennan played way too many times to be that person. Well, we'll see after the last clue.
Yeah,
Tony Dunn played like 500 times, didn't he? Something like that.
I think he broke the 600 barrier.
Loads of appearances.
Pretty sure he's 535. Yeah, Tony Dunn. Very high up in United's rankings.
Yeah. Actually, doing Guess the Player has made me actually learn a lot more about this stuff, because I would never have known that he played that. I knew Tony Dunn played a lot of times for United, but I never would have known he played that many times. And because I've had to look it up the appearance list a lot of times in setting Guess the Player clues so far this season.
It's very easy to just scroll down the appearance list and go, right, him.
Yeah.
That's what I often do. We're going to go into Patreon Q&A, but we're going to give everyone a chance to listen to, because there are some really good questions, and I think there's some nice conversations to be had. But before we start, a congratulations to one of our patrons, Christopher Anusis, who ran the Manchester Marathon at the weekend and did it in a ridiculous time of 3 hours, 12 minutes before watching United play away at Forest in the Sir Ralph Abercrombie in Manchester, which we'd recommended him before. Let's start with a question from Ethan, who says, what's the strongest back four without Martinez and Varane? Ethan says his would be Malacia, Shaw, Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, but he was impressed with Dallow's left-back performance against Forest, so it's good to have another option. He's gone for Maguire over Lindelof because of his aerial abilities. I think picking a strongest back four out of your kind of backups is almost impossible to do without it being opposition dependent, because Maguire and Shaw often, yes, but the pace of that back line would be, concerning. And Malacia helps with that, but he's been in poor form recently. Wan-Bissaka helps, but what about that other side? I think Dallow at left back does give you a bit more security, but I think my instinct after the Martinez injury was Shaw and Maguire, but Lindelof has actually been very good when required this season, unflappable at times, and looks better in that left centre-back position. I think it's so opposition dependent. You know what? You go for your back four while I continue to mull this over.
See, you'll stiff me up while you do it. I think so. So the challenge here is that you're right about Lindelof, and I think this performance at the weekend definitely kind of changed my opinion of the upside of having Lindelof in the team. I think when we're playing
the other big thing is that you don't want to lose Shaw's. I think when we've had short centre back, we've lost a lot on the left side of attack.
Yeah, I was going to say I think the more we expect to have possession, the more I'm okay with Shaw at centre back, because he's going to be tested less, and his ability to get us moving in attack. Shaw at centre back takes away his attacking threat in the final third that he can have when he plays at full back, but at centre-back, he is definitely our best of our available options with Martinez out. He is definitely our best player who's able to play as a centre-back and play really good passes into midfield to get us moving from deep against a team that are going to sit back and let us have possession.
Yeah.
So I actually think the more possession we're expected to have, the more I would want Shaw at centre-back. I think the less we're expected to dominate a game, I'd want Shaw at full-back more. Because I think he's better than Malacia and you'd want that extra security there. Malacia hasn't been great recently, like you alluded to. But also the benefit you get from Shaw being out in the final third in a game where you'd probably expect there to be a bit more opportunities for us on the counter-attack, I think is more important. And so you'd want Shaw at fullback. So if we're saying for Sevilla, let's say on Thursday night, in a game that I think is going to be quite scrappy, and I don't think we're going to dominate possession, but I think we'll still see more of the ball than maybe we expect. I think I would be tempted to go with Shaw at centre-back, and maybe even Dallow at left back, given Malacia's poor form and Dallow's performance at right back. But I think Shaw and Maguire, I'm happy with that as a partnership. I just think, I'm not sure Ten Hag would play Lindelof on the right.
I don't think
and
he
I
would,
don't
no.
know how moving to the right would change what we saw from him against Forest.
Yeah. I don't think you can have Shaw and Lindelof as a partnership. I think neither of them are aggressive enough. But I think for Sevilla, we were going to talk about this later, but we'll talk about it now. I think I'd be very tempted to continue with Dalot at left back, have Shaw at centre back, and Maguire and Wan-Bissaka. I haven't seen enough from Malacia in the recent games. He's not been up to the standard. I mean, we saw that in the home leg, both in attack and in defence, with a completely inexplicable mistake. And especially if he's been a little bit injured, then it would make sense to persist with Dalot. So I that's my main concern, is you don't want to lack Shaw's attacking quality, because with the players that we're missing in attack, like Rashford specifically, it's so important to all of that. And I do think Dalot gives that kind of, he's the foil to that missing creativity. So yeah, I think we both agree with that.
Yeah.
In terms of Maguire, his performance at Forest, it was so shaky to begin with. And I mean, it just looks nervous. And we praised him the other night for stepping out of defence and being proactive. I think for the Everton game, we said he had a really good performance, and that proactive defence and getting in front of his man and winning the ball back and keeping those attacks sustained. But he looked nervous. It was nervous Maguire again. And the booking third minute was the worst example of that. And then even when he had something right later on, I think it must have been around the 15, 20 minute mark, he poked the ball out for a corner. And it was, in the end, it was a really important intervention. But even in doing that, he was hesitant, and he eventually went for it, but it was almost too late. And nervous Maguire is so bad because he's such a big unit that any kind of hesitance in what he does, it's a foul immediately, and it's rightly a booking, even though he's for straight back.
Well, and it also means that if the hesitation means that he's sort of slowing down, it's taking him double the length of time it takes Varane or Martinez to get back up to speed. If it's, sort of chasing a ball or something like that, it really does show up.
That being said,
otherwise
I was so impressed by the way he composed himself, because I was really worried for him. And I don't think Maguire should be starting for United too regularly anymore. I think he can be a useful option, but he's not done enough to earn himself a long United career. But I did feel for him, because I feel for any player when you just see the kind of world crumbling around them and the pressure closing in. And I thought, this could be it. He could have a first half sending off here if he's not careful. And he was giving away the ball as well. And there was a point where he just composed himself. And to do that under that pressure is, it's good. He's won his last 11 starts for United.
I know, and that fact is not lost on him either. I mentioned last week that he mentioned he brought it up in an interview after the Everton game. So he's keeping track of that. I mean, a lot of that will also be down to the fact, he's playing
games,
League Cup and FA Cup games. But I mean, still, it's important games, and he has been winning them. The first 20 minutes were really, really poor. But like you said, you've got to give him credit for how he came back into the game, and he just kept things simple, which is sort of what you want. Like, there was a point, this must have been after about 15 to 20 minutes, he received the ball in a fair bit of space, sort of around our halfway line, or the halfway line. There's only one. We don't have our own one. Around the halfway line. And he had a lot of space in front of him that he sort of drove into. Ended up, there was a ball onto Wan-Bissaka the entire time. He ended up dribbling 20 yards forward, tried to play a really simple pass to Wan-Bissaka on his left foot, and he put it straight out for a throw. And that you just felt at that point, it's like, oh my God, it's going to be one of those days. But I think after that, he just sort of settled down and kept things really simple. And that's really what you want from him. That's fine. There weren't really any long of the long kind of switches that he's very good at when we play at home, where there's a much bigger pitch, a lot more space for us to work in. I think Lindelof, like you said, taking charge as much as he did probably helped a lot as well, because it sort of stopped Maguire from having to take as much leadership when we were in possession.
Yeah.
I also thought, I'm actually surprised this didn't get more scrutiny on it. I'm really surprised he didn't give away a penalty in the first half. I think that handball, I really was expecting that to get given on VAR.
From what I could tell, I saw two possible reasons it wasn't given. And I don't know whether this was actually the case, did it come off a different body part and then onto his hand? Did it brush off his head? Because the replays weren't conclusive on that. I wonder whether they looked at that and determined that it did, so it wasn't handball. And the only other reason I could think of is that had it not hit his hand, it was going to hit a United player.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, Dermot Gallagher on Sky Sports, like Ref Watch, said that, there were arms everywhere. Everyone had their arms out. It would have been harsh to give it. I just think, well, like every other player can be standing like a scarecrow. But if it hits one person's arm, it's still a foul, which didn't really make much sense to me. I was just shocked it didn't. It's one of those ones where I don't even know if I think that should be handball.
I think it's a harsh.
Because the handball rule was just a mess. I was just surprised it didn't get given where the handball rule is at the moment. But anyway, that is just to say it was part of that shaky start. He composed himself really well. And in the end, actually, I've got to give credit not just to Maguire, but the whole defence, because I was convinced early in the game that we were going to concede from a corner in this game. Like the first few, every single time, it was like it was a complete knife edge. And partially because we stopped them having so many corners, but even when they did have them in the second half and stuff, we dealt with them much better. Maguire was a big part of that.
Okay, let's go to Corey Lennox's question, who says, we've talked about the lack of rotation throughout the season, specifically in cup matches. Do we think the non-stop injuries as of late are due to that? I think it's so hard to determine that without being even a medical expert on the outside would struggle to have a proper conclusion on that. And as someone without any medical expertise who's had a sprained ankle, well, officially an ankle ligament tear, if you want to, I actually have exactly the same intro as Alejandro Garnacho, and he's come back in 3 weeks-ish. It's taken me about 15 months. So I'm the opposite of medical expertise. I think it's hard to, I'm going to speak on it anyway. I think it's hard to say it's lack of rotation. I think some of them, like Rashford, you can kind of guess that's probably likely. Muscle injuries are often going to be down to playing a lot. And Varane probably. Ten Hag spoke about, after Varane got injured, said he's had this problem for a couple of weeks. So lack of rotation then, that's almost certainly it. But Martinez breaking a metatarsal seems unlikely. I think it's sometimes lost that by playing more games, the chance of injury is higher, not because your muscles are gone, but because simply from a kind of statistical point of view, you're playing more. There's more opportunity for you to get injured, even if it's an impact injury, like Eriksen and Martinez and Garnacho and various others.
But it's important to, you're right there, but it's important to also say that doesn't increase the risk of injury.
That's what I mean, yeah. Like
to any one player that plays more, it just means that by playing more games, you would expect United to have more injuries than other teams.
Yeah, you've got more exposure to the possibility of being injured.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you said, without being medical experts, it's obviously hard to say. Muscle injuries are usually the ones that you can put down to playing more. But even the Rashford one, I'm a bit hesitant to even say that's down to playing too much, because that wasn't like he was just running and then his groin went. His groin went from when he was stretching for a ball. And I mean, that's happened to me when I'm playing football. I haven't played in, 2 weeks, just in training, you're like stretching for a ball. That's easily done. So the Varane one, like you said, to me, maybe even not lack of rotation. It just felt like it was a risk to play him in the first place, since he had been struggling with this knock for a couple of weeks.
Well, that kind of is lack of rotation, isn't it? That's an unwillingness. Well, I guess, but that's not. Keep him out the team. Maybe I'm just being a bit too nitpicky about the phrase. Lack of rotation to me is more like wear and tear coming from just playing too much. That was more like I felt like he had a knock and probably shouldn't have been playing in the first. But I mean, it's all under the same umbrella of playing too much. So I wonder whether,
to be honest,
the decision not to play Sabitzer was a bit of scarring from deciding to play Varane.
Yeah, possibly. And probably having more faith in Eriksen as the replacement than he would have done in Maguire replacing Varane on Thursday. I do think, though, just the other point I was going to make, we're obviously getting this huge pile up of injuries now. I'm surprised we haven't had more injuries throughout the season, honestly. Yeah. Because you think we've been playing 3 times a week since the last week of December, and it's taken until now for these injuries to pile up. Really, before that, Varane has had these knocks here and there, as you kind of expect with him. But other than that, it's really only been Eriksen until the last few weeks that's had any kind of significant injury. So yes, they've obviously all happened at once. Whether they're down to rotation or lack of rotation is sort of hard to say. But in general, since we've played, how many games we've played now this season? It's like 55, I think, maybe a bit more.
Oh, wow.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I'm plus the World Cup in the middle for a lot of our players. I'm surprised that we've really only had one major injury before. Well, I know there's Martial too, but he's similar to Varane, and he just it's a bonus if they're fit.
Well, let's talk about Martial's injuries in the context of Victor Osimhen, because Michael Byers says, are you worried that Osimhen is a 125 million version of Martial? Brilliant when he plays, but so often injured that his actual numbers aren't that good. He also asks, does movement from the relatively slower and less physical Serie A to the Premier League worry you about injury recurrence? I think any player who's even had a couple of injuries, you're going to want to be really sure that there's nothing wrong there. But that's kind of the point of scouting and medical reports and literal medicals when you sign for a club. So I think it's fair to have some concern there. I looked at his injuries. At Wolfsburg, he had a meniscal injury, calf injury, shoulder injury. He then had another shoulder injury at Napoli, coronavirus twice. He's had a head injury, calf strain, cheekbone fracture, and a bicep and abductor injury. Total at Napoli over 3 seasons, he's missed 49 games. I'm going to discount coronavirus from that. And I'm also going to discount a cheekbone fracture and a head injury. I don't think that's a concern. They're freak incidents, particularly the cheekbone fracture, which was very serious. That takes the games missed down to 29. It's not ideal. I think that shoulder injury, you might be a bit concerned at. 3 injuries at 2 different clubs, but he hasn't had that for 3 years. It's hard to tell. I don't see it as much of a concern. In comparison, by the way, Martial has missed 53 games in the same time as opposed to 49. And his injuries, you can't call freak. They are, a ridiculous array of hip, knee, ligament, hamstring. He missed 3 games of fitness. There was an unknown muscle injury, an Achilles problem, a back problem. There's all sorts. And prior to that, before these last 3 seasons, he had a series of muscle injuries. So I don't think it's much of a concern. Having watched Osimhen, not loads, but I've been so impressed in the Champions League, and whenever I've seen Napoli play, he was so fun to watch. So fun. And I hope they beat Milan in the second leg of the quarterfinals. And if City reach the final, Napoli, the only team on that other side of the draw, to have any faith in stopping them winning a potential treble. But when you've watched Osimhen, I don't think you can have any doubt about his power and physicality. He looks immense in that regard. The only thing I'd say is maybe is the Phil Jones trait, in that he throws himself at things, so he gets injuries like a shoulder injury or a head injury or cheekbone fracture.
So you meant that he makes weird faces?
No. I haven't noticed that, does he?
No, I haven't noticed it either. When you said the Phil Jones trait, that was just the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough. But I do think there is a bit of that. You see the intensity with which he throws himself at chances.
Yeah.
And then he gets injured from some of them. I wouldn't think of that as a concern. I'd see that as, brilliant.
Yeah, looking, this question also prompted me to look at Osimhen's injury history, because to be honest, it wasn't something I'd seen all that much about before, or really seen as much of a discussion.
I think the context to this is he missed the first leg of the Champions League quarterfinal.
Yeah. I don't think it's a huge problem. Like, obviously, you'd rather sign a player that's never had an injury in their life. But I think what you're really looking for is 2 things. One is it an amount of injuries that feels like they're just a fragile player, something like a Varane or a Martial. Yeah. And I don't think from looking at it that it's too big that I would worry about that. And then the other thing you're looking at is repeat injuries. And in Osimhen's case, the only one really there, you mentioned it, the shoulder injury has repeated a few times. He hasn't suffered with that for a couple of seasons. So, is that enough to fully get rid of that worry? Maybe not. Also, on a wider point, 125 million version of Martial, I think it's different. When you signed Martial, he was a kid from Monaco who'd had a few fleeting good moments in the Champions League. Osimhen, you're signing a proven Champions League goal scorer. Yeah, it comes down to, I think, just what the comfort level of the people in charge of making that decision is. Like, it's obviously, let's say it does cost 125 million pounds. That is a huge amount of money that carries with it not just the financial cost, but also a big opportunity cost in terms of who else we could sign
Can you see it happening, in short?
If there are...
Because I can't.
This summer, no.
Yeah.
But that's not because of the player, that's because of the ownership situation.
Yeah, I just mean, can you see us inside of United? I don't, not really.
No.
Michael's other question is top 4 and that's it enough for the rest of the season? With all the injuries, can one reasonably expect more, as in win either of the trophies that we're still in? I'd reasonably expect, as if I was a neutral looking at United, I wouldn't be saying a failure to win another trophy would be a failure as a whole. The season would be a success, top 4 and the League Cup, particularly with these injuries now. You're 2 first-choice centre-backs. But I can't say that as a fan, because what can it's not about expecting, is it? It's about hoping and dreaming of an amazing week in Budapest and winning the Europa League. In terms of what I think we're more likely to win, I'd probably... Sevilla, winning in Sevilla is going to be really difficult. But I think I'm more confident for that than Brighton. On the other hand, Fernandes suspended is massive. So that might drag them down to about the same. I can't see it. Put it this way, I can't see us winning both of the games this week. And so, again, it's not about expectations, it's about hope. But what do you say, as if you were looking on as a neutral or a highly paid Sky Sports pundit?
Well, to directly answer the question, if we finished 4th and didn't win another trophy, whether we get to the finals or semi-final of either of them or not, I still think that is 100% a successful season from where we were back in August. I think if you and I, Harry, in our season preview, I think we both said top 4 in a trophy, great. Given sort of where the season's gone, I think you'd probably come away feeling slightly disappointed that A, that we haven't finished 3rd, and B, that we couldn't get over the line in the FA Cup or the Europa League. But I think from a big picture point of view, it's still been a massively positive season. Realistically, I think we'll probably make one of the 2 finals, and then it's a toss-up whether we'd win.
Yeah.
I'd probably be more confident winning the Europa League final than the FA Cup final, just based on who we will likely play if we make it to either of those.
Incredibly. Brighton and then City is probably a harder run to a trophy than beating Sevilla away from home, then beating one of Juventus and Sporting over 2 legs, and then a final, despite there being more games, more opponents, and whatever, and it being a European trophy. Whoever wins the FA Cup this year is really going to deserve it for once. Let's wrap up the Patreon Q&A and talk about the FA Cup. United women in their first FA Cup final on the 14th of May, 2:30 p.m. on BBC One at Wembley against Chelsea. Beaten Aston Villa 3-2. It was a really poor first 45 minutes, actually, at Leeds Sports Village. United were massive favourites to beat Brighton, who were bottom of the WSL. United are top of it. I think 30 points, or maybe over 30 points, separates the 2 teams. It was a pretty complacent first half performance. United looked off it. Lucia Garcia, the Spanish winger, 24, looks good. A rare start for her after some really good showings off the bench, but nothing was flowing perfectly. And then there was this terrible Mary Earps mistaken goal and an own goal. Cross came in, she parried it into her own net. United got an early goal back in the second half, in under a minute from Leah Galton, and then went ahead through Alessia Russo. Ridiculous finish. She has this ability to find the roof of the net with ridiculously powerful finishes. They're amazing to watch. Then another mistake, another rare one. Millie Turner, who was too weak, and the experienced Brighton forward Danielle Carter capitalised on it. And then it came to Rachel Williams, the most experienced forward, to settle it in the 89th minute with a really good finish. It was a great game. It should have been more comfortable for United, but Brighton were really good. And to get to an FA Cup final is brilliant. And yeah, I can't wait for that. Chelsea, I can't see United beating Chelsea just because I don't think we've beaten Chelsea at all yet. They're too good.
Yeah,
but
brilliant day
great to get there.
for the United women's team. You're right, the first half was poor, and United will be really frustrated at the 2 goals they conceded. But it felt, to be honest, it felt quite a lot like sort of a classic cup tie, in that, you know, the big team, quote unquote, sort of plays a bit down to the level of the smaller team. The smaller team clearly sort of up their level in such a big game, and it ends up being a real sort of back and forth battle throughout the entire game. I think you've got to give United credit for coming through it. It's like so hard when you're already playing badly. It is so hard to sort of pull yourself up from that and be able to come back. I mean, especially after Brighton pegged us back at 2-2.
Yeah.
Like when you go down 1-0, especially quite early on, you still got a lot of faith that, you've got time, you've got the quality to come back. Having then taken the lead, done all that hard work to get it to 2-1, to then be pegged back again, that's a real body blow. And we've seen plenty of teams over the years get stung by that. And I think United deserve a lot of credit for sticking with it. It was a great finish by Rachel Williams for the winner.
I love it when an experienced player comes on like that and just goes, look, I'll sort things out.
Yeah.
So calm.
It was a great moment. And, a massive step for this United team. Obviously, only 4 or 5 years from being
the double is still on.
Recreated. Yeah, even if they end up losing the final and not winning the WSL, the progress that this team has made from their first season since being reinstated has been massive progress. And now United are in a position to be one of those kind of established heavyweights alongside Arsenal, Man City, Chelsea.
Yeah, I think the big three retain their status for now. Yeah. But depending on what United do at the end of this season, that will become the big four. United would be the first winner outside of the big three since 2012 when Rachel Williams won it with Birmingham City if we beat Chelsea in the middle of May, incredibly. And as a reminder on the league status, United are top, having played one more game than Chelsea and Arsenal. Chelsea are 1 point behind, Arsenal are 3 points behind, and United have a better goal difference than them both. But at the moment, it's Chelsea's. I wouldn't call it Chelsea's to lose, but it's in Chelsea's hands.
But I think Arsenal and Chelsea have to play each other, don't they?
I believe so, yeah. We play...
Sure, I remember that being one of the games coming
We
up.
play Arsenal this week on Wednesday, 7:15. The Arsenal game was moved for the FA Cup semi. So whether United are going to win the league will probably... If we were to lose to Arsenal, I think that would probably... We also have to play City in the second last game of the season. So there's so much still to do. We've got a really hard run of games actually because we play Villa away and Villa in good form in a couple of weeks. And yeah, City in the second last game of the season. So a lot to do. I'd say Chelsea are favourites, but United do have a chance. So let's see what happens. Quick academy update. The under-18s lost 3-1 in the Manchester derby, went 2-0 down early on. City's first was a good, powerful finish, some dodgy defending. And then the second came from Nico O'Reilly. He scored both of their first two. The second, just an audacious, brilliant lob from well over 30 yards. Louis Jackson's header reduced that deficit to 1, but City quickly restored the advantage direct from a free kick. It was a deserved win for them, to be honest, as it always seems to be coming up against their very, very talented academy sides. The good news was Finlay McAllister made his return from a knee injury in the match. He'd been out since October, only 16 years old, midfielder. He's also a regular home and away with United. I saw him at St James's Park a couple of weeks ago. I see him most games in the Red Army section at Old Trafford. And some positive graduate news. Mark Helm, a name you might recognise from a couple of years ago. He left United, I can't remember, 18 months ago, a bit longer. A good, hard-working midfielder. He was doing well at United, but he left to join Burnley. He's since gone to Burton Albion, and he was in the League One Team of the Week this week, which is good to see. Jack, very quickly, we haven't got loads of time, but Ahmad, in short, another great goal, correct?
Yeah, another great goal. Cuts in from the right. Actually goes past Hannibal Medbury, fellow loanee, in the build-up to the goal, and a brilliant finish. As a reward for his brilliant performances all season, he's been shortlisted for the Championship Young Player of the Season award as well.
Lovely. Ethan Laird?
Played as just the sub for the last 15 minutes for QPR. Mentioned recently that he came back from injury. He was out for a couple of months with a hamstring problem. He's kind of struggled to regain his place in the QPR team, but QPR are in a bit of a mess at the moment. They're in massive freefall in the second half of the season. So it's not the easiest situation for Ethan Laird at the moment.
Yeah. Difficult since Michael Beale left to go to Rangers.
Yeah, exactly.
Having said, he was very loyal to QPR, rejecting the Wolves job and then left. I think it was like 2 weeks later. Was very funny. But wouldn't be funny if you were a QPR fan. Let's stick with the fullbacks. Alvaro Fernandes at Preston. Yeah,
he came on as a sub as well. He played the last 25 minutes after starting on the bench against Millwall. He played okay when he came on, but Preston ended up losing 2-1. Actually kind of strange in that Fernandes at Preston and Ahmad at Sunderland are in really, really close proximity at the moment. Only 1 point between them. Preston are 1 point behind Blackburn, who currently have the last playoff spot in the Championship. Sunderland are 2 points behind. So a lot on the line for those two towards the end of the season. It's good for both to get some experience playing in some really meaningful, high pressure, high stakes games in the back end of the season.
Yeah, also playing high stakes, but at the other end of the table was Charlie Savage. But those stakes have been scythed down because Relegation has been confirmed, hasn't it?
Yeah, the writing's been on the wall, really.
I didn't even realise I was making a Forest pun there as well.
I didn't realise that either. Even after you said it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have been relegated. I think they only won once since Charlie Savage joined. They've only won, I think, 5 games all season. It's just been really tough for them all year. Duncan Ferguson coming in wasn't able to really help very much, and they're the first team in the Football League to be confirmed as relegated.
Duncan Ferguson being given a vegan burger on his first day at Forest Green Rovers will forever live on in my mind. Yeah. Next to I think we can call him the eccentric order, Dale Vince.
It did always feel like a bit of a strange fit.
Yeah. I liked Ferguson was kind of presented with this burger and then said, "Oh yeah, I'll try that later." Because the Sky reporter said, "You don't have to eat it now." And he was like, "Oh, I'll enjoy it later." I was like, when are you going to take a cold burger home from Sky Sports? But any other particularly notable ones?
Most notable was, yet again, Maxi Oyodele. We talked about him last week that he scored for Altrincham. He scored again. He scored against Oldham last week and this week against Dorking. Now, despite being a defender or defensive midfielder, I think that's his 4th goal now since being on loan at Altrincham. His second in his last 3 games. He and Joe Hugill both started for Altrincham, but despite Oyodele's goal, it actually ended up being quite a bad afternoon for them. They were 2-0 up inside 10 minutes and lost 3-2. So not the best. Elsewhere, Matikova had a slightly tough game. He conceded 3, but Sparta Prague, his team drew 3-3 against Slavia Prague in the massive game of the Czech League. Sparta Prague had maintained their lead at the top. A few other players playing. Charlie McNeil started. Deshaun Barner just came off the last minute or so. So some good minutes all round, but no huge standouts other than Ahmad this week.
Okay, Sevilla on Thursday. We haven't got very long. The key question, who replaces Bruno Fernandes?
Sabitzer.
Oh, I'm going with Fred. Fred to cause some carnage.
I've been really shocked at how few minutes Fred has played, actually, over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, recently. It's been a bit strange, isn't it? Because he was having some really good games before. I wonder what the thinking is there. Given that I'd expect Eriksen to play, having started that game now and been so good, and it's not like he had to do that much physical exertion in that game. Do you think he'll go forward to replace Bruno's influence, or do you think whoever is replacing Bruno will be a direct replacement for him?
I think it'll be more of a direct replacement. I think Ten Hag will be really reluctant to move Eriksen further up the pitch. I would expect Eriksen and Casemiro still at the base of midfield, and then it's who you bring in to play as sort of number 10. I mean, if we bring in Fred, you could play more of a flat midfield 3, but it doesn't seem like something Ten Hag has loved to do so far this season. I just think that's why I expect, I say Sabitzer, I forgot that he got injured actually before the game. So assuming that he's fit, I think he would come in because he's played that role and played it quite well at various points this season. I mean, it would be great. I don't think he will be. It would be great if Rashford is fit, because then you can put Sancho at number 10 and play Rashford out wide. But I really don't think that's going to happen. I'm also, so we spoke about Sancho. I'm not convinced he'd had the aggression to play number 10 in a game of this higher stakes. But we'll see. I'm going to give you your final guess the player clue, which we need to do quickly before we give a prediction. Your final clue is, when Matt Busby sold me for £33,000, I told my wife I'm going to haunt him. And that's exactly what I did, becoming a key player and winning 2 top flight titles, an FA Cup and a League Cup. And to be fair, a lot of other things as well. It's Giles. Is it Johnny Giles?
Yeah. Johnny Giles.
I know that quote, absolutely. Yeah.
82 years old now, born in Dublin. He was fair to say, well, he was a fan favourite at Leeds, but he was also loved as a pundit on RTE in Ireland. I expect any of our Irish listeners probably got that a fair bit earlier.
I honestly, even now, wouldn't have got that from the 2 earlier clues, but I know that quote quite well. Yeah,
it's not in United's favour, but it's a great footballing story. And I think Busby recognised what a great player he was at a later date. Your prediction for Sevilla?
4-0 United.
Brilliant. I can't wait. It's tricky, isn't it? I'm going to back United to win and lose to Brighton.
Okay, interesting.
Are you going the same or the other way around, or even more confident and a double victory?
No, my actual prediction, I think we'll beat Sevilla. I think we'll beat Sevilla 2-0, and then I think we'll beat Brighton on penalties.
Wow. If that happens, I'm about to have one of the greatest weeks of my life.
Yeah.
So, on that very, very happy note, thank you for listening, everyone. And we'll speak to you. We may speak to you in separate ways, as we did after the home leg, after the Sevilla away leg. We will definitely be reacting next Monday evening / Tuesday morning to the Brighton game. And let's see what kind of a week we have. You know where to find us on Twitter. If you enjoyed the Patreon Q&A, you can sign up and get that kind of thing every week for as little as £1.50 a month. Find us on Twitter at UTD Weekly Pod for information about how to do that. Other than that, have a brilliant week. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
Podcast Network.